nothing but the truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa from India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with key issues of concern and bring you perspectives and clarity as to why these matter to you and the one clear truth that emerges. In this episode, we will deal with cancer, a word that is received with dread, trepidation, fear, and is regarded as a death sentence. In 1984, when I was a young reporter with India Today magazine, I did a major feature on cancer. And even then, the trends were worrying. But what was the real bother was that at that particular time, India was, in some senses, inundated with communicable diseases. And these are infectious diseases that we're all familiar with, whether tuberculosis, leprosy, influenza, diarrhea, all these kind of things were prevalent. But even then, there was the beginning of what was called lifestyle diseases, where effluence began to show up, and these were diabetes, heart attacks, and cancer. Now, all of us have become familiar with that particular word. In 1984, when I wrote the piece, the prevalence rate of cancer was close to 1.5 million cases. Now, almost 40 years later, my colleague Sonali Acharji, who has done a report in India Today magazine, a cover story, says that there is close to 28 million cases today. In 2020, close to 700,000 people died of cancer. That's almost 7 times the number of those that died of COVID during that particular year. That's how serious it has begun. But even as we face these stark statistics, there's both bad news and good news about cancer. But before we get into that, let's look at what causes cancer, or what we know of what causes it. In our body, there's something like close to 37 trillion cells. We have a mini universe of cells in our body. And if you want to know that number, just add 12 zeros to 37. That's how many cells we have. Now, among all these various cells, each of them have been genetically coded to grow in a certain manner and at a certain pace. Somewhere among these cells, one of them begins a rebellion. It gets anarchic. Now, the size of this cell is so tiny that if you put 1,000 of them, you would get a pinhead. But that rebellious cell begins to multiply rapidly, more than it should. For instance, if it starts multiplying in your hand, you begin to get a tumor. If it does so in the lungs, it also causes that. In fact, it attacks every other part of your body, every major organ, and wherever it does, where the cells begin to multiply more than they should, the tumor forms. Now, some of these tumors are benign and don't grow beyond a certain point, but some turn malignant. And not only do they infect that particular part of your body, but begin to spread rapidly across. And worse, the survivability, if you do not treat these cancers, is very, very short. In other words, within a month or even 6 months, you could die of cancer if you are diagnosed fit. Now, in India, when studies were done, they found that among men, mouth cancers and lung cancers were more prevalent. But among women, it was cervical cancer and also breast that had begun to grow. Of course, there have been other kind of cancers that have been reported in large numbers in the country, and these include stomach, the kidney, the liver, pancreas, and blood cancer. These are just to mention a few. They have also been growing across the country. Now for the good news. There are many kinds of treatments available for cancer, and there are major advances that are now happening in biotechnology that give plenty of hope for cancer patients. But first, let's look at what has happened in terms of the previous 3 to 4 decades and the kind of treatments that are available. They have improved in sophistication, and let me go over them. One, of course, is chemotherapy, which is using drugs to inhibit cancer cells, and over a period of time, you are able to successfully reduce them to make them not so dangerous to you. Now, they come with side effects. As we know, a lot of these lead to hair loss, there's nausea, and there's fatigue, apart from the fact that it lowers your immunity. The second is radiotherapy, where you're exposed to radiation, and these cells are then, cancerous cells are targeted and killed. But unfortunately, like chemotherapy, they also kill healthy cells. And therefore, there is a period of recovery that is needed. And here also you have the similar kind of symptoms that you face with chemotherapy. The third form that is very popular is surgery, where if the tumor is localized at a particular part, the entire tumor is excised and operated upon, and hopefully it has not spread to other areas. While these have proved effective in reducing the number of deaths for cancer, the estimates are that, particularly in advanced forms of cancer, it is able to treat only to 30 to 40% of the patients, and the remaining, unfortunately, result in fatalities. But there is hope that has come in a very new area, which is called gene therapy or immunotherapy. Now here what scientists are doing, and this is a very advanced research that is going on, is at the cellular level, at the gene level, they're beginning to modify the gene itself and introduce genes that can tackle, or introduce cells that can tackle the cancer and attack them directly. Now these forms of treatment are considered more effective, apart from the fact that they target very specific cells, and therefore the damage to the other parts of the body is minimal. So let me explain the 3 or 4 new forms of treatment that are available as simply as I can, because these are very complex technologies. Let's start with precision oncology. And as the name suggests, that it strikes precisely at the target cells, and this they've done by having laboratory developed molecules and monoclonal antibodies that go, once introduced in the body, go precisely and restrain or attack those cancer cells and destroy them. The second form of treatment that is now available is called immuno-oncology or immunotherapy. Now here scientists have worked on the immune cells of the body, and by modifying these immune cells that are normally rendered inefficient to tackle cancer cells, by introducing and modifying it, they're able to attack that cancer cell directly and destroy them. And the third form of treatment is called molecular oncology, where laboratory developed molecules attack the cancer cells where at the gene level itself. So they're able to find those cells and destroy them before they can become tumors that are very harmful. And very interesting for India, the fourth form of treatment is called Vaccinology, where for the first time there has been a vaccine developed to prevent cervical cancer, which is widely prevalent among women in India. And this has been done by the Serum Institute of India by developing a vaccine that attacks the particular virus that triggers cervical cancer among women. Now there is good news in diagnostics too. Earlier there used to be invasive methods like taking a biopsy from tumors and testing whether they were malignant or not. But now a simple blood test, as we do normal blood tests where blood samples are taken, can detect cancerous cells at a very early stage, particularly in breast cancer, and enable treatment speedily so that it doesn't become dangerous or harmful. The good news is that these forms of treatment that were normally got only abroad and were very expensive are now coming to India and are becoming both available and affordable. Though there are many of them in an early stage and a lot of work needs to be done, but the fact is that they spell hope that over a period of time, the prices of these forms of treatment would begin to come down. Now, just to give you an example, in leading hospitals, you can get a test to detect blood cancer for rupees 9,000, a simple blood test that is there. And for cervical cancer, to prevent cervical cancer, the vaccine that Serum Institute has introduced cost between rupees 200 and rupees 400 for a shot. So these make them affordable. Certainly 9,000 is still very high, but they are likely to come down. The vaccine is much cheaper and could soon be institutionalized across the country as the COVID vaccine had been done. Now the other encouraging news is that various advanced forms of treatment that are available in the US are now coming to India, with various companies introducing them and producing research that could make them far cheaper. One of the examples is what is called the CAR T-cell therapy. It is a bit of a mouth twister for a chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, which uses immune cells, modified immune cells that are then introduced. They take immune cells from your body. It's a simple sort of blood sample that is taken, and then they go back into the laboratory, change the immune cell in a manner that it is now able to fight the cancer cells, and that is called the CAR T therapy. It costs something like rupees 3 crores in the US, and with experiments going on now in India across various laboratories, it should bring it down to rupees 30 lakhs for the treatment. Still high, but yet over a period of time, doctors say and specialists say that once these become institutionalized in India, the prices of that particular form of treatment, which is very, very promising, could come down considerably. There are other forms of treatment called NK cells, very similar to the kind of immunotherapy that is there, very exciting in terms of the way it targets it, because tumors are classified into what are called hot tumors and cold tumors, and immunotherapy is being developed to handle these things. The hot tumors are ones that cause skin cancer, melanoma, and lung cancer, among others. And in this particular kind of tumor, there is an accumulation of immune cells that act as a blockade to other kinds of cells that could be receptive and destroy them. And what this particular advanced immunotherapy does is to remove that inhibition and allow these healthy cells to go and attack the cancerous cells and destroy them. I'm putting it very simply, the science is far more advanced. And when we talk of cold cancers, which are pancreas and of the liver and other forms of cancer, here the immune cells are considerably lower, and therefore you need to stimulate cells, introduce cells that are stimulated like NK cells that can go and destroy these cold tumors that are there in a far more effective manner. Again, I am paraphrasing a lot of research, and in trying to make it simple could also be somewhat incorrect in the approach that is there, but broadly these are the ways that cancer is being attacked. Now, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who heads the Biocon Technologies, a premier pharmaceutical research company, has started work on these advanced immunotherapies in collaboration with certain individuals and organizations, as a whole host of companies. She believes that this particular form of advancement that is there spells greater hope for patients across India, and feels that over a period of time, once these become more plentiful available, the prices will begin to drop. And it has improved survival rates for patients enormously in the last couple of decades, and that is good news. So what is the key in this? The bad news is that cancer continues to spread rapidly across the country, and you and I can do things to prevent that cancer, because some of them are preventable, some of them are genetically triggered, and the ones that could trigger or cause it are, of course, pretty well known now. Smoking is a major problem, so is eating pan and other irritants that are there in the mouth, which causes mouth cancer. And you also, in terms of cervical cancer, better hygiene for Indian women will help prevent that, as would the vaccine does. Apart from that, the stressful living that we do is one of the major triggers that doctors feel that though you might have cancerous cells, these actually begin to get activated when there is a lot of stress and pressure that builds up, and therefore the entire advocacy of having a healthy lifestyle and ensure that you're doing everything in moderation. That's very important. Even as we try and prevent cancers, treatment, as we have seen, needs to be both available and affordable. There's a lot of interesting and encouraging developments that bring hope. We need to speed this up, and the government also should start investing or encouraging investments in these areas so that we can tackle a major disease that has become a threat right across India. For more details, you could read the cover story of India Today magazine. Thank you for listening to this edition of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing but the truth.